Hello guys and welcome back to the Motor Recon podcast. I'm your host Adam. I'm joined again today by Rob. What we're going to do today actually is probably one of our sort of favourite subjects because everyone loves a good movie. So what we're going to do is cover sort of our favourite movie cars. We are going to try not to cover a lot of the cars we have mentioned in the past or sort of talked about a lot of them, the various variants of that particular car. So we're going to stick to some of our favourite films but also some of our favourite cars. So the first one, kick off the bat, probably one of our both personal favourites, is the Bullitt Mustang.
Yes.
I don't know how you can not like this car.
It's also one of those ones where when you think about movie cars, other than potentially the DB5, which we haven't got in this list because we cover it enough, people think of the Bullitt Mustang. They think of Bullitt, that's just that.
And obviously such an icon, Ford did do the remake of the Bullitt Mustang last year, which has obviously gone down a big hit. Now, the thing that I like most of all about the Bullitt Mustang mainly is the colour. A nice dark green with sort of black wheels, silver and black wheels on the edge, and obviously it's from one of the most iconic car sort of chasers. Would you call it? Yeah, it's a car chase with the Dodge Charger, isn't it? I think from the film.
I think it's interesting with Bullitt because it's probably one of the first examples of a car chase in the movie which isn't necessarily over-dramatised. There's no music at all. And obviously there's lots of continuity issues with it. I know that. But
it's an old film though. They had a lot of that back in the day.
But to watch it through in one and you obviously don't think about some of the continuity issues in the chase, it feels very plausible.
Realistic.
It's a plausible car chase. There isn't anything in there that's too outrageous that makes you think that's just not possible.
No. Now, for those who haven't seen the film, obviously it is probably one of the most famous car chases of any film of all time. Actually, I don't generally like the whole film actually, but the car chase itself is actually not bad. And it's actually up against the 1968 Dodge Charger.
Yes.
Which is also another famous iconic car. It's been in many films over the years. But it's back in the day when these two were sort of going head to head as well for probably the muscle car titles.
Yeah, pretty much.
Of the day. It's
interesting how when you fast forward to 2019, I don't know whether the Charger has held on.
It's now a 4-door saloon.
Yeah, but I mean now but even the Challenger, I don't think the Challenger really holds on compared to the duking it out of, the Camaro and the Mustang. I don't think
it is popular in a sense that they've got the Demon, is it? The Dodge Challenger Demon.
That's true, but I'm just talking about your stock ones. I'd be curious to see, this may be another time where we look at motoring rivalries, where we look at the sales figures of cars that go head to head against one another.
We know the Mustang won this battle hands down throughout history in many senses, apart from when it had his dips probably in the late 80s,
because I might add as well, the Mustang had I think all cars actually had a horrendous time in the 90s. No muscle car looked great in the 90s.
No, I'd agree with you on that. That's a good one. Nice one to kick us off. We're not going to go into too much detail on all of these, but I do applaud if you are interested in cars and you are interested in films, go and watch Bullitt and see what you think of it. I generally didn't like the film as a whole, if I'm honest, but the car chase is an iconic one.
Bullitt is
good.
Yeah, it's a slow burn of a movie. I think that's one thing. If you like the artistic style of the time, and if you like a movie that's more about thought than necessarily action, obviously the car chase is very action packed, but beyond that point I wouldn't say the movie is overly action packed. It's more stylish. It is
and for that you can appreciate it, especially for the time it was made.
Yes.
Obviously, as we did mention, it's up against the 68 Dodge Charger. It's the RT440 one. In all black, which again does look good. One of my favourite muscle cars of all time, second to only the Mustang, if I'm honest, on that front. So it's a good comparison and a good race between those two for the chase.
We say famous moment in the movie where it's the shotgun just leaning out the side of the Charger.
Obviously, it's a standard thing to do. Also, isn't that the term riding shotgun comes from the police cars in America, doesn't it?
I thought riding shotgun came from the wagons back in the day where they used to have someone ride shotgun at the front of the stagecoach.
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Neither of us are sure.
No, the only one I've heard it was in a police car. The secondary officer in the passenger seat was the one who had the shotgun on the inside of the car.
That would
and
figure.
Obviously they can, when they're doing so, they can pull it out, not for chasers perhaps, and pop the tyres. I thought that's where it came from. But anyway, that's a whole other discussion. On this actual subject, another very, very famous Mustang, and overall my absolute favourite Mustang of all time, is the Shelby GT500, or in this case, Eleanor from Gone in 60 Seconds.
No questions, I like it. I do like it, but do I like it as much as the original 69 Fastback from Bullitt? For me, no, it's not. It's too over the top for me compared to the original. I stripped back.
I understand that from your point of view, because I know obviously your taste is much more of a clean design. But this for me, as a kid, I grew up watching Gone in 60 Seconds. I watched it countless times, and I still watch it to this day. Some would say it is a terrible film, and in many respects it is. The acting is appalling.
Yes, it is.
And many other things. Obviously, one of Nicolas Cage's finest moments. But as a car fan, when I was a kid, the amount of cars that are in it, but also the scene when he's getting chased by the police in Eleanor and he does the jump on the bridge, totally unrealistic. The car would be smashed to pieces. But it just, when you're a kid, that just got me all excited, and it's just the memory of it, I think, that makes it good.
This highlights, because it's interesting since it's obviously a similar car / same car in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
The differences between how you can do car chases. Yeah. Obviously, you have Bullitt's perspective where it's a little bit more realistic, and when obviously they're going round San Francisco on the relatively small jumps, you feel it, and you also feel that if they keep this up, the cars will break.
Yeah,
you get that impression that they're not built to take that kind of punishment.
No,
whereas in Gone in 60 Seconds,
they do a massive jump over the back of a recovery truck.
Yeah,
onto and if that was it, the suspension would collapse in on itself just from the weight of the car. But
whereas I think Bullitt gives you that impression of vulnerability.
A bit more realism. Yeah. And to be honest, Gone in 60 Seconds, while it is genuinely one of my favourite films, no matter how bad it is, just because of the nostalgia and the memories of it. I can still watch it every day, and I could just smile watching it. It's an easy film. Don't take it seriously, and just sit back and enjoy it. And I think as a car nut, you can't go wrong. It's one of the most legendary car films that there's been. Oh, look at it! We're just looking at some pictures now with the Mustang. It's absolutely gorgeous. And even one of the original movie cars, actually, apparently this article saying it went up for auction. Doesn't give us how much it went for, but
I'm suspecting a insignificant
hefty
amount.
chunk. I know there's one for sale at the moment for 950 grand. That's just second hand for sale.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's by the by. Next on the list is one that you've chosen.
Yes.
And also another good highlight for me, so I'll let you take this one.
When we both saw this design, we both realised that we thought this is where Aston Martin was going to take their future. I thought it was a very bold step into the unknown for them in a certain respect.
Yeah.
We're talking about the DB10. Now, Spectre isn't a great movie.
I don't mind it.
It's all right. I mean, I enjoyed it enough and it was serviceable, but it's certainly not the best that Daniel Craig has put out.
No, Casino Royale for me was his favourite.
Casino Royale was his favourite. But for me, the DB10 is interesting because it's a design that I feel has held up for one. This was 2015,
yeah, very
remember?
much so. Yeah,
and also it's had a lasting impact on Aston Martin's design, given that the new Vantage is essentially, with a few tweaks, a DB10.
Yeah. Now you were mentioning just off microphone that we've done a bit of digging on this. It's the old Aston Martin Vantage chassis, and I think engine as well. Definitely engine as well. Put in
a new skin, isn't it?
In a new skin, but obviously this skin has now become the new Vantage.
I thought this was a very clever play from Aston Martin, actually, testing the water with a Bond movie on a sort of a limited run car to see how people would take it. People clearly liked it.
Yeah, and this as well. I know a lot of movie cars do go up for sale, but it's normally years later that they actually come out. But this one in particular was sold pretty much at the time. Once he'd finished filming, they sold the cars to customers. Because I always thought, I know when they first announced this, it was actually called the DBX, but I know the DBX now is the silly off-roader from Aston Martin. But when they announced it, everyone's like, why are they... Because they announced the DB11, I think, before this even... Was DB11 before this was announced? Might not have been. And they was like, why is it... You can't skip 10.
Yeah.
But they had done the DB10.
They had already done 10, yeah. No, I've always liked it. I like the fact that it had a manual as well, and obviously, thankfully, that's something that is on the Vantage now, which is nice to see.
Also, as well, does feature in probably not one of the most famous chases in all time, but it's
still a Bond chase.
Yeah, Bond in the DB10, and is it Batista? I know,
it's
not his actual
Dave
character
Batista,
name, but it's Dave Batista in the CX-75 from Jaguar, which is a car they definitely should make. But that's another movie car as well. It's probably worth noting.
The actual chase itself, I find, is quite slow-paced in a lot of ways.
It is.
There are a few things that I like about it, and there are a few things that I don't. I feel that it's interesting. I think there was more scope to do more with it.
They could.
You were in Rome. I mean, there are a couple of shots that are fantastic.
Yeah, the big drifting through past the Colosseum and stuff. That's cool.
See, that's what I mean. There were a few shots in there that you realise, wow, yeah, those big, long, continuous shots. But I don't get the sense of speed with it.
No, you don't. The one thing I didn't like, which they did, was they tried to add that. I know it is the typical Bond thing, trying to add a bit of comedy in there, but when he's stuck behind that old man in the Fiat 500, and he's sort of trying to push him along, and then he gets getting
it's
stuck.
It's a bit too Roger Moore, isn't it?
I don't mind
but
it.
No, the trouble I find with it is the fact that Daniel Craig's historical outings in James Bond haven't been that humorous.
No, they haven't, and I think they just tried to add it in, but that particular bit didn't work for me. But the car itself, I think, was a fantastic movie car.
I prefer the styling of the DBS, which they used in Casino Royale.
Genuinely, I do also.
And I would say that that's actually a bit of a surprise for me, because the DBS is not as clean of a design as the DB10.
No, but it is prettier.
Yeah, I think it's prettier. And I also think that it is one of the rare occasions where I prefer the more souped up version to the standard. I like a standard DB9, but it is one of those rare occasions where I actually prefer the DBS to the DB9.
Yeah, well, they beefed it up in a very elegant manner, which is good. And also, again, that debuted in Casino Royale before it was actually announced. Not before it was announced, but before it was sort of put on sale. Which is probably a good ploy by Aston Martin to get it in the movie and then sell it, because then people buy it.
People already recognise it then, don't they?
The manual ones of them are shooting up in value.
As you said, we probably mentioned this in a previous podcast, but we were lucky enough to talk to a guy down at Salon Privé who had a manual DBS, didn't he?
He did,
and he stated that obviously because they didn't sell so many manual DBSs, that they are obviously accumulating in price more significantly than the automatics.
Well, a lot more.
And I would want the manual from those days, because you got to remember, these days auto boxes have come on an awful long way, and I agree that the performance in an auto box now is probably better than a manual.
Oh, 100%. It's not even close. Yeah, it's not even close.
But back then, obviously, maybe the auto box was faster, but they were a lot more clunky and juddery round
single
town.
clutch and things like that. The thing is, though, as well, like modern auto things to go with this, like they are absolutely no fun.
No, we both agree on this.
It's so seamless. So don't get me wrong, if you're just commuting to work every day and back, then yeah, fair enough. But it's just if you actually want to have fun in a car, unless you're in something ridiculous like a McLaren or Lamborghini or something where you get the noise in the theatre.
There are only a few occasions where I feel like I would want an automatic. Say, for example, on my normal commute to work, which does involve some city driving, I've never felt like I wanted to ditch the manual.
No.
However, when it took me 5 hours to get into work one day because of a big traffic sort of accident, yeah, I wish I had an auto, because my clutch foot was hurting after that point.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. That's when they come into their own. But for most general use, I don't see the fun or appeal at all. But anyway, back to the movie car. Really good choice. I'm glad you've actually picked that, because it is something that I sort of forgot about in a way.
It's true, it is. Now the Vantage is out, and now that Bond's moved on, I think it is falling into a bit of obscurity, actually.
Well, I've been looking if I've seen the DB10 in the flesh.
Yeah.
And it does look fantastic. Personally, I do prefer the Vantage. I know you don't, but personally I prefer what they've just tweaked slightly for the Vantage.
Oh, don't get me wrong, I don't dislike the Vantage either. But for me, if it was a design choice between the two, I'd take the DB10.
Yeah. So they made a good decision for you on that movie car.
Yes.
Debut it.
They did.
Excellent. Another one, actually it is another Bond car, in a say. It's Wet Nelly, which, as you probably all know, is the Lotus Esprit submarine from James Bond.
It's obviously The Spy Who Loved Me, that one, yeah.
Now, great looking car,
Yes.
for one thing. So I think they made a good decision on that front. It's called the Wedge, isn't it? Like a slice of cheese in many respects.
Apparently, there's an interesting story on how Lotus got themselves, obviously, joined up with
Into
Bond.
the movie. Yeah.
Rumour has it that a Lotus executive drove down the Lotus Esprit with no badges on it down to the production studios of Bond, parked the car outside. Obviously, it didn't say Lotus anywhere, and he just left it. And obviously people took an interest in it because, I mean, the design is sensational.
Oh, yeah.
They clearly knew what they were doing, that if you just left it, they would probably come and have a nosy and wonder what it is.
Oh, yeah, of course you would.
So, yeah, I've always liked it.
I like it. And also, again, it's probably... Everyone will know what it is. Even if they haven't seen the film, they will know what that car is in the submarine from James Bond.
I think it's kind of risky, you know. It was, I think, for the sort of producers of Bond to go for Lotus.
Yeah, over the more traditional stuff.
Well, when you think about it, Bond is sort of more synonymous with high-end sort of luxury supercars or luxury sports cars. Lotus doesn't typically come under that.
Especially not at this time.
Well, Lotus typically doesn't come under that high. They are particularly good at making lightweight, fast, sort of, you know, track-focused quite often cars. I know the Esprit is a bit of an exception, but let's be honest, at this time, Lotus, you know, famously stood for lots of trouble, usually serious.
Yeah,
you know.
Which probably they deserved a bit at the time because they were renowned for it, and they were quite bad. But nevertheless, a fantastic movie car. If that story is true, and that is how they got it into the movie, credit to that Lotus executive who did that. And also, I do like the name that it comes, which is Wet Nelly. I think that is actually quite a good name for a movie car.
Well, as you say, Little Nelly was the gyrocopter thingy from You Only Live Twice. So I think they've gone for a
sort of namesake for that. It's got it written there. Actually, look, the namesake.
Oh, there you go.
Nelly.
Yeah,
there we are. Yeah, it's owned by Elon Musk.
Yeah, I've just noticed that as well.
I did remember, actually, I remember an interview with him, so it cost him $100,000, surely not.
It'll just be the tub.
Yeah, probably.
It'll just be the tub. I doubt they made one that actually went underwater.
Obviously not. That would...
I don't think that would have been possible.
No. It is a good scene, though. Well, I'm guessing they did it.
Yeah.
They actually drove one into the water to get that scene of it splashing in, but it would have just been a shell, wouldn't it? Of all the things. Okay. Moving on quickly to that one is probably, I'd say, maybe the most famous one we're going to talk about.
What we're talking about today, I feel like,
Yeah, not obviously of all time. Yeah. Probably the most famous. I think everybody must have seen this film, no matter what age you are. But it's the DeLorean from Back to the Future. Now,
DeLorean is one of those companies where the car is a bit crap.
Yeah.
And I might also add as well, didn't they contract Lotus to do some of the chassis work with this?
I think they did, yeah.
But the thing about the DeLorean is it's more interesting about how the car sort of came into being and the owner and the whole drugs thing. And
I think he was framed slightly for that as well, because he was just doing the thing to try and keep the company going. Which
it was, I think the story behind DeLorean is probably more interesting than the car itself, and obviously the movie that it's associated with.
Yeah, that is probably true. That is very true. But the design-wise, I think it is a genuinely good-looking car. I actually don't mind the looks of it. And in the brushed sort of...
I think it's unique, all
brushed
right.
Brushed steel sort of bodywork so it doesn't rust. Good idea.
Brushed steel is... I must admit. And as far as design is concerned, I think they look spectacular.
Yeah. Gold wing doors as well.
Yeah, I just think engineering-wise...
they were horrendous.
It was lacking in the engine... Design, brilliant. Engineering, no, because weren't they very down on power as well? Wasn't
extremely.
It like a Peugeot slash?
Something daft.
It was a crazy sort of.
They had a lot of them had different engines.
Right. Okay.
I think it was supposed to be the Peugeot engine, but I think people have done various different things, and when they were producing it, someone couldn't deliver enough engines, and there were all sorts of various different bits and bobs going on.
I think this would be a perfect car, obviously, for people to make modifications to. I mean, the car that's famous is famously monstrously modified.
Yeah.
So it's one of those where...
Yeah. Was it my brother's next door neighbour has a DeLorean.
Mm-hmm.
I've sat in it and everything like that. It's not running at the moment. It was obviously when he bought it.
Yeah.
But it's got into a bit of a state where he just needs to change the starter motor and a few other bits and bobs. It has the parts. It just needs to get around to do it. And I'm if he is listening, because I know he sometimes does tune in, if he is listening and you ever get that working, I beg you, can I have a drive? I want to experience what it is like. And also, Paul, if you are listening, just have a word with him if he's not.
I'm not sure exactly how brushed steel will last.
Extremely well. It's stainless steel.
Brilliant.
Does not rust at all, which I think is part of the reason why they do it. The only one probably its downside is it's fairly heavy.
Yeah.
As a weight issue, it is quite a heavy thing. Probably not the least it has no power, which also doesn't help with the weight.
But I will say the bodywork will be maintained. If it, obviously, given that it's stainless steel, so it won't rust.
No, it will never rust.
And also because it's brushed stainless steel, no scratch marks really that'll cause major issues, I guess, because it's not like it's shiny.
No,
I think it's a very unique design.
Extremely unique. Made in Ireland originally.
You're Northern Ireland, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've got to give them credit for that.
Yeah.
I just wish that it had been done right.
Yeah, but for what they had no money, and for what they did with a very no money, and I don't know the story of how it ended up in this film, but I think it is quite a good story. I've heard it, but I can't remember it off the top of my head, and it was a good story. But they do still make them. I think it's California or Texas, one of the two. They got all the original bits from all the factory when it obviously all went bust, and they still do make them.
Yeah,
which I think is pretty cool. So it's probably something that stood the test of time more so than others.
Yeah.
For those who haven't seen the film, I can't imagine there's many of you. However, obviously the DeLorean is famous for being a time machine in Back to the Future. Hits 88 miles an hour and you can go take you to any year you want. I won't spoil any of the other film bits for you, but that is what it's known for, being a time machine.
It's not a car movie, but I'd strongly recommend watching it all the same.
Yeah, actually, to be fair, while it isn't a car movie, the main thing is it is time travel, and the car is the device that uses time travel.
Exactly. And again, it has made it one of the most famous cars in the world.
Yeah, because it's not a car film, normal people who aren't into cars also watch
they also know it, exactly.
Yeah, who also know what it is as well. Now, so the next one, probably one of the most obscure ones on the list, I'll go for, because quite frankly, I didn't know this, but this is Rob's random Bond facts for you.
So, it's the Sunbeam Alpine. Now, that's an old British sports car manufacturer from way back when. This is famous because it is the first Bond car in a movie.
Yeah.
So it is the first Bond car. Obviously, Doctor No. The chase is nothing to write home about.
Well, I'm guessing it wasn't real because it's on a green screen with him turning a steering wheel and the background's moving.
It's largely on a green screen, and it essentially comprises of Bond being chased by a hearse down a mountainside.
Yeah,
it lasts about 4 minutes, and I think the hearse goes under a crane and goes off like a cliff.
Standard.
It's not a huge Bond, it's not a huge car chase, but this movie wasn't made on a huge budget either. You got to remember this was the very first one.
Yeah, they didn't know if
they didn't know whether it was going to be popular or not, so they did the best they could with the money that they had back then.
That's probably why they had a Sunbeam Alpine, because it wasn't an expensive car.
Exactly. Yeah.
The Sunbeam probably give it, and they were made in mass numbers for Sunbeams. I've obviously heard of the car. I just did not know it was the first Bond car at all. I don't know many facts about the car. I'm not good with my classics in that sense, but apparently it was a 1961 Sunbeam Alpine Series 2.
Yep.
Not that means anything to me at all.
Yeah, apparently it had a 1.6 twin carb engine. So
again, slow, but that's not the point of these.
Yeah, well, I don't know though, because it would have been light.
But
do you know what? Yeah. I don't think it will have been that bad.
No, it is a very pretty car.
Yes, it is.
It's got, you know what the front end reminds me of? Like a 50s Corvette, but obviously small.
Yeah, it's interesting. You wouldn't look at it and typically think Bond car either.
No, but
it's
again,
interesting.
This was the first one, like you say, so
they didn't
have that image in.
And when you consider prior to this point, really, Bond had been synonymous with Bentleys in the books. It's tough, isn't it? I mean, they're trying to do something new.
All right, so another one again from Bond.
Yeah,
probably one of his slightly more famous cars, but also probably not synonymous with Bond.
No,
is the BMW Z8. Now, I knew this one was a Bond car. I didn't know the other one was. But again, for those of you who don't know, BMW Z8, quite an old car now, actually. 1993 originally. Like that. Oh no, 2000 to 2003. Sorry, not 1993. Where am I getting wrapped from? 2000 to 2003.
That's right.
Not many made. 5,700 and something.
Yeah.
Quite low production numbers. 4.9 or 4.8 litre, depending on which one You're going for the Alpine version, had the smaller engine, widely renowned for being one of the worst handling cars.
I was about to say, yeah. Obviously, this was in You Only Live. No, it's The World Is Not Enough. Sorry. Interesting because the car isn't that good.
No,
in a lot of ways.
Good looking.
That's the thing. It's a superb looking car, just not a great handling car.
No, but it was made for the American market where corners aren't really a thing.
I will say as well, I love the interior.
Yeah, I also quite like the interior.
I think the interior is very futuristic and in certain respects has held up.
Yeah. One thing as well, it might have been Bond that helps these out or slightly the cult following, but the value on these is they've gone up a lot. They're all well over $100,000 now for a good one.
I think it's largely because of how rare they are.
And also,
they didn't sell very
the
many.
Rarity. They don't make them in right-hand drive as well.
Yeah, it's rarity. I think that comes into it. I think obviously it is associated with Bond because these are the BMW years from sort of like late 90s to 2000.
Yeah. Apparently as well, the Z8 was a homage to the 507, a very old school BMW, and I can see the resemblance in some respects.
I very much can see the resemblance actually. I think they look, yeah,
quite similar. But nevertheless, very pretty car. I say it is not well known for being a Bond car, but probably not his most famous effort. Obviously, we all know that's the DB5, but we're going to try and avoid talking about that. Next on the list, another one that Rob has picked out, and also probably one of the most famous cars for many different reasons.
Yeah.
But the Porsche 917. So, why don't you crack on with that one?
So, it's the movie Le Mans from early 70s. It's Steve McQueen's movie Le Mans. It's got the 917, so famously McQueen did drive for Porsche.
Yeah.
So he has raced for Porsche. I don't believe he raced at Le Mans. I think it was a choice between either filming his film or actually racing in it. And I think he chose to film his film.
Yeah, because that would make him more money ultimately.
Well, I think it was more he wanted to make this movie. It's in the famous Gulf colours. And I think the 917 has become synonymous with those Gulf colours.
Now, his was the 917K.
Right.
Which does... When you look at they look similar-ish, but there is very pronounced difference. Mainly the rear end more so than the front.
Yeah.
It's sort of the straight back, flat pan sort of look.
Now, obviously, the movie itself isn't actually that great. I will say that on the record.
No,
I think
agree.
The actual racing sequences are brilliant, as in it feels very real. It's clear that McQueen and the directors...
I think that comes down because he has actually raced.
But I think they took great pains to make it feel as real as possible when the racing is actually taking place.
Yeah.
But there's a lot around it that really sort of bogs the movie down, I feel. So, I think I would thoroughly recommend you watching the documentary called The Man in Le Mans. So that's about the making of the movie, and you realise...
It's actually better than the movie.
It's crazy. The issues with the production were insane. I won't spoil it for you here because you just will not believe it until you watch the documentary. It's better than the film.
Yeah, now I have actually watched it as well, and I will agree with you on that. It is better than the film.
You will realise it's a miracle the movie ever came out, let alone actually was alright in certain parts. It's sort of like... That's the level that you're at with this.
No, I would agree on that front, and also just as a personal point, as many listeners will know, I'm not the biggest fan of Porsche.
Yeah,
but that is something to behold.
It's true, isn't it? I think the 917 in general, we might want to cover it in a little bit more detail in a different podcast.
You know, you can get pretty much perfect kit car replicas of these for like $40,000.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be nice.
The only other thing to mention about this one is there's a comic book, interestingly, for Le Mans, like a graphic novel which got well reviewed. So essentially, it's a fantastic artwork in it, and it basically tells the story of Steve McQueen's Le Mans in a little bit more of a succinct way. Yeah. I think it's to fix the wrongs with the movie in a lot of respects.
Yeah. Now, while neither of us have actually read this, obviously. You knew it was there, I knew it was a thing, but we can't find any for sale. Not on eBay, not on Amazon, not on anything. So the limited numbers that they must have made of it are probably like gold dust now. Yeah. So if you can get one, if you found one at a car boot sale or something, probably.
Oh, yeah, snatch it up.
Snatch it right up. Quickly moving on, just before we wrap up, probably one of the most famous trios. I say trio because they're all the same, but the Italian Job Minis.
Yes.
Now, I love the Italian Job film for many different reasons, but I do probably the most famous thing in it are the cars.
Yeah.
Now, I've always been a fan of the original Mini. I don't think there's a human alive that doesn't like the original Mini.
It's one of those rarities where, despite in its day not being a hugely expensive car, it's transitioned beyond that, as in, it didn't matter how rich you were, everyone loved the original Mini.
While I don't like the new Mini, it is classless.
Yeah.
It is classless, and they've pulled off the same trick than what the original had. Famous Alex Issigonis, is it, the original designer of the Mini? Legendary design, front-wheel drive car, the engine-mounted transverse, so it obviously could fit more room in the cabin. Very pretty little car.
Yeah,
I love the design. We're actually looking at some now just for sale, just to show you how much they've gone up. There's an original 1965 Cooper S for £69,950.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong, it's immaculate.
I mean, it's probably, I would say that is the best original Austin Mini, sort of. I think that's the, it's in the best nick I've ever seen.
However, like, he's looking at this one, there's one, that has 66,500 miles on it. There's one just below it, which says 1967, so it's 2 years newer, however, left-hand drive.
Yeah.
Only done 2,141 miles, allegedly. But that's 24 grand.
Yeah, it's 24,000 euros.
And euros, so yeah, it's probably about 22 grand if you take the exchange rate. So it is a difference between that, but 69 grand for an original Mini. But do you know what? If it was that or a big German saloon for that sort of money, I'd take the Mini.
It's a better investment.
It is a better investment. It won't depreciate like it's fallen off a cliff, and people won't think you are a swear word.
But no, people will actually admire you for doing it.
Yeah, I would. One of my favourite cars, just for just looking, it's beautiful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but again, probably one of the most famous movie trios where they're driving into the back of the buses and having the chase around the mountains. Obviously, they're doing the theft and things like that. Also famous for having the Miura.
Obviously, we've forgotten about this.
I did forget they had a scene with the Miura at the beginning.
But obviously, he gets tipped off a cliff.
It does, which is a shame for the poor car, but I don't know if it was a real one. Back then, it might have been, because they weren't worth very much, were they?
Yeah.
But anyway, it's by the by. Original Mini, fantastic car.
Yeah.
Genuinely would recommend going to watch the original Italian Job.
Absolutely.
Do not watch the remake.
Yeah, no, I just watched the original. It's got everything that you need. Yeah. It's held up.
Yeah. But anyway, probably a good place to wrap it up there. There is a couple more cars we did have lined up, but we'll cover those in sort of probably another episode or something else when we come back to it. I'll just list them off quickly of what they were. So we were going to do the Ford Gran Torino from Gran Torino, the film, and also, for me, the Jeep Wrangler from Jurassic Park. But unfortunately, we're just running out of time on those. So, as always, if you do want us to discuss any other topics, let us know in the comments below, and we will do that for you. Or let us know any sort of movie cars that you think we've forgotten and you think we should talk about in the future. But if not, we will see you next week for another episode.
Yeah.
See you later. Bye-bye.